The storm raged through the dense forest like an unrelenting beast, tearing at the trees with savage force. Rain hammered against the earth, each dropping a cruel assault on the already sodden ground. The wind howled through the towering pines, twisting their branches into grotesque shapes, as if nature itself had turned against the land. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a deep, guttural growl that echoed through the storm's chaos. The forest floor had become a battlefield of mud and shadows, where the elements waged their merciless war against anything caught in their grasp. Lightning slashed through the sky, illuminating the scene in brief, eerie flashes, revealing a lone figure struggling against the storm's wrath. Each gust of wind carried a biting chill, cutting through the night like an unseen predator, seeking to devour the weak. Nature was at its most ruthless, and only the strongest would endure. Through the relentless downpour, a battered German shepherd staggered forward, his paws sinking into the treacherous mud. His fur, once thick and noble, clung to his frail body, drenched and matted from the storm's cruelty. Each step was a battle against exhaustion, his legs trembling as he pressed on. His ribs, barely concealed beneath his soaked coat, rose and fell with heavy, labored breaths. Hunger gnawed at him, but it was nothing compared to the numbing cold seeping into his bones. His eyes, once sharp and alert, were now filled with a mix of fear and desperation. Every instinct screamed at him to find shelter, to escape the storm that threatened to consume him. But he had nowhere to go, nowhere except forward. With a feeble whimper, he pushed ahead, driven by a need stronger than his own survival. His ears twitched at the distant crack of thunder, his body flinching involuntarily. But through the chaos, his instincts remained sharp. He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was searching for something, or someone. Inside a small, dimly lit cabin, Jake sat at his worn wooden table, a steaming cup of coffee cradled between his calloused hands. The fire in the hearth flickered weakly, casting trembling shadows along the walls. Rain pelted against the windows, but he barely heard it over the weight of his own thoughts. A former firefighter, Jake had once been a man of action, a protector. But that life was gone now, buried beneath the ashes of a tragedy he could never outrun. He had seen flames consume more than just buildings. He had watched them steal lives, tear apart families, leave nothing but sorrow in their wake. And when he had failed to save the one person who mattered most, the fire had claimed him too, not in body, but in spirit. Now, solitude was his only companion. The outside world had become a distant memory, something he neither needed nor wanted. The storm outside was just another reminder that life was unpredictable, relentless. And yet, despite his isolation, a hollow emptiness gnawed at him, a silence that even the howling wind could not fill. The storm roared on, rattling the windows as if demanding entry. Jake took another sip of his coffee, staring blankly into the fire. Then, through the cacophony of rain and wind, a sound reached him. A faint, desperate whimper. His fingers tightened around the mug. At first, he thought he had imagined it, a cruel trick of the storm. But then it came again, sharper this time. A pleading cry carried through the night like a whisper from the past. His heart clenched. He had spent years ignoring the world, convincing himself that nothing out there was his concern anymore. But something about that sound. It cut through him, stirring something long buried beneath his grief. Jake set the cup down, his pulse quickening. He rose to his feet, listening intently. The storm shrieked in defiance, but the whimper was there, persistent, fragile, a call for help. Jake hesitated, his fingers hovering over the handle of the cabin door. The cold metal sent a chill through his skin, grounding him in the present. He told himself to ignore it, to sit back down, let the storm pass. Whatever was out there wasn't his problem, but his feet refused to move away. Instead, his grip tightened. With a steadying breath, he reached for his flashlight, pulled his coat over his shoulders, and braced himself. The wind pushed against the door as he wrenched it open, the cold slamming into him like an unforgiving wave. He stepped outside, the mud sucking at his boots, rain lashing at his face. He aimed the flashlight into the darkness, searching. And then, just beyond the tree line, his beam caught the trembling figure of a dog, its eyes locked onto his, pleading. Jake's breath caught in his throat. He had been wrong. The past wasn't knocking at his door. It was staring him right in the face. The wind howled through the trees, rain hammering the earth in relentless sheets. Jake pulled his jacket tighter around his body, his boots sinking into the mud with each step. His flashlight flickered against the darkness, barely cutting through the thick curtain of rain. He told himself he was imagining it, that faint whimper, barely audible over the storm. But then there it was again, his breath hitched. The sound was weak, desperate, pulling him forward despite the voice in his head urging him to turn back. His fingers clenched around the flashlight as he moved toward the noise, heart pounding harder with every step. Then he saw it, a heap of tangled branches, the remnants of a fallen tree blocking the path ahead. And beneath it, barely visible in the flickering beam of his light, was a shadow that shifted ever so slightly, followed by another soft, pained whimper. Jake crouched, his breath misting in the cold air as he swept his flashlight over the shadow. His stomach clenched at the sight. It was a dog, a German shepherd, its fur slicked with rain and matted with mud. The animal's ribs jutted against its thin frame, and its chest rose and fell in shallow, labored breaths. Jake hesitated, his fingers tightening around the flashlight. The dog's eyes fluttered open, golden orbs clouded with exhaustion and pain. There was no aggression, no fear, just a quiet resignation, as if it had long since given up hope of being saved. Jake swallowed hard. He hadn't planned on this. He wasn't the kind of guy to take in strays. And yet, something about the dog's frail form, the silent struggle in its eyes, made his chest tighten with something he hadn't felt in years. The shepherd tried to lift its head, muscles trembling from the effort. Its front legs scrambled against the mud, but they buckled beneath the weight of its own body. A sharp breath hitched from the animal's throat, a sound of frustration mixed with pain. Jake knew that kind of fight. He had seen it before, in himself. The moment when sheer willpower wasn't enough, when the body refused to obey, when surrender felt like the only option left. Rain dripped from his brow as he exhaled slowly. The dog was barely hanging on, its struggle fading into stillness. If he walked away now, there would be no second chance. He cursed under his breath, running a hand through his wet hair. Damn it. He wasn't supposed to care. Jake had spent years building walls, shutting out the world. He had no room for complications, no patience for attachments. He clenched his jaw, torn between instinct and self-preservation. His fingers hovered inches from the shepherd's trembling form. He could just leave, walk away, pretend he never heard that whimper. It wasn't his problem. Then the dog's eyes opened again, weak, unfocused, but locked onto him with something he couldn't quite name. Not fear, not even hope. Just quiet acceptance. A recognition of pain, perhaps. Of loneliness. Of the kind of loss neither of them needed words to understand. Jake swore under his breath. His chest ached, old memories stirring where they had no business resurfacing. He wasn't this guy. He didn't save things anymore. And yet... The shepherd didn't move, barely had the strength to breathe. But there was something in its gaze, something raw and silent that hit Jake harder than words ever could. A plea, not just for survival, but for something deeper, for someone to stay, to not be abandoned again. His hands curled into fists before he exhaled sharply. Damn it all. He reached out, brushing a tentative hand over the dog's cold, drenched fur. The animal flinched at first, but then, slowly, weakly, it let out a breath and settled against his touch. Jake sighed. The storm raged on around them, but at that moment the battle was already lost. He had made his choice, even if he didn't fully understand why yet. Bracing himself, Jake slid his arms under the shepherd's frail body, lifting it carefully. The dog didn't resist. Too weak to fight, too exhausted to care. It pressed against his chest, its heartbeat faint but steady against his own. The weight in his arms wasn't just physical. It was something deeper, something he had avoided for a long time. Each step back toward the cabin felt heavier than the last. Not because of the storm, not because of the mud sucking at his boots, but because for the first time in years, he wasn't just carrying a stray dog, he was carrying something else, something he thought he had buried long ago. Hope. And whether he was ready or not, he knew things would never be the same again. The cabin was silent, except for the rhythmic crackling of the fire. Jake knelt beside the German shepherd, his hands carefully pressing a towel against the damp fur. The dog flinched, muscles tensing beneath old scars that spoke of past battles. For a brief moment Jake hesitated, unsure if the shepherd would bolt, but exhaustion weighed heavily on the animal, and instead of pulling away, he let out a slow, shuddering breath and remained still. Jake worked gently, wiping away the chill of the storm, his touch light but firm. He could feel the dog's body quivering under his fingers. Whether from cold or fear, he wasn't sure. He spoke in a low voice, more to fill the silence than anything. "Not gonna hurt you, buddy, just trying to help." The shepherd's ears twitched, but he didn't move. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was a start. Jake wasn't used to company, not the human kind, and certainly not the four-legged kind. But as he moved around the cabin, lighting the old lanterns and setting a pot of stew over the fire, he felt the dog's gaze following him, watching, measuring. When Jake placed a bowl of food on the floor, the shepherd didn't rush to it. He eyed Jake first, warily, as if unsure whether this was a trick. Then, cautiously, he stepped forward, sniffing the meal before taking a tentative bite. Jake exhaled. He wasn't sure why he cared so much whether the dog stayed. Maybe it was because, for the first time in a long time, someone, something, was here, in this quiet, forgotten cabin. And despite the dog's wary eyes, he hadn't run. Not yet. By the third day, the shepherd had found his footing. His once unsteady steps had turned into confident strides, his movements no longer sluggish from exhaustion. He followed Jake outside as he chopped wood, pausing only when the wind howled through the trees. At first, Jake thought it was a coincidence, the way the dog always seemed to be at his heels. But then he noticed, every time he moved, the shepherd moved too. Not out of curiosity, but with intent, as if guarding him one afternoon. As Jake carried a load of wood back to the cabin, his boot caught on a hidden root. He stumbled, the logs scattering across the snow. Before he could move, the shepherd was there, standing over him, ears perked, eyes scanning the trees as if searching for unseen threats. Jake let out a short laugh, brushing snow from his jeans. "Easy, buddy, just clumsy." The shepherd didn't relax right away. Only when Jake stood did the dog step back, his posture easing. It wasn't just survival instinct, this was something else. Loyalty. Jake had seen his fair share of dogs, strays wandering the streets, farm dogs herding cattle. But this one was different. It became obvious in small ways. The way the shepherd sat with perfect posture, ears always alert. The way he responded to commands that Jake hadn't even meant to give. When Jake absent-mindedly muttered, "Stay," before heading out to the shed, the dog remained frozen in place, waiting until he returned. Then there was the way he stood guard at night, never sleeping until Jake did, always watching. Jake narrowed his eyes. "You're not just any dog, are you?" The shepherd merely stared back, silent and steady. Someone had trained him, and whoever they weren't here anymore. The first time Jake noticed the nightmares, he was woken by a low, distressed whimper. He turned in bed, his eyes adjusting to the dim glow of the fire. The shepherd lay near the hearth, his body twitching, paws jerking as if running from something unseen. A deep, sorrowful growl rumbled from his throat, his ears pinned back in fear. Jake sat up. "Hey, buddy." The dog didn't wake. Instead, his legs kicked harder, his breathing quickened. Without thinking, Jake reached out and placed a firm but gentle hand on the dog's side. "It's all right, you're safe." The shepherd's body stiffened for a moment, then slowly relaxed under his touch. The tension in his limbs eased, and his breathing steadied. Jake frowned, his fingers absently running over the scars on the dog's back. Whatever had happened to him, it hadn't been easy. Someone had hurt him, and whatever ghosts haunted his dreams, they weren't letting go. Neither of them knew how to escape the past. The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows along the cabin walls. Jake sat cross-legged on the floor, staring into the flames. The shepherd lay beside him, head resting on his paws, silent but present. Jake exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I had a best friend once." The words felt foreign, rusted from disuse. But for some reason, sitting here with the dog, they came easier than they had in years. He was a firefighter. We went through training together, lived together. And then, one day, a call came in, a house fire. We went in. Jake's voice faltered. His gaze remained fixed on the fire, as if trapped in the past. "I made it out. He didn't." The cabin fell into silence, save for the wind whispering outside. Jake swallowed hard, blinking away the burning in his eyes. Beside him, the shepherd didn't move. He didn't whimper, didn't nudge. He just sat there, solid and unmoving, listening. And somehow, that was enough. Jake hadn't cried in years, and tonight wouldn't be any different. But something inside him cracked. A small, invisible break in the armor he had carried for too long. He felt a soft pressure against his palm. The shepherd had nudged his nose under Jake's hand, pressing against him with quiet insistence. No words, no noise, just presence. Jake exhaled shakily, his fingers tightening slightly in the dog's fur. He wasn't alone. Not really. The fire crackled, the storm outside beginning to fade, and for the first time in a long time, so did the weight in Jake's chest. The night was still, save for the rhythmic chirping of crickets and the occasional rustling of leaves in the cool evening breeze. Jake sat on the porch, absent-mindedly stroking the shepherd's thick fur, enjoying the quiet companionship. Then, suddenly, the shepherd tensed, his ears perked, his muscles coiled like a tightly wound spring. Jake barely had time to react before a pair of headlights pierced through the darkness, their blinding glow illuminating the driveway. A truck rolled to a slow stop, its tires crunching against the gravel, sending a foreboding chill down Jake's spine. The truck door creaked open, and a man stepped out, his shadow stretching long against the dim porch light. His presence was commanding, his silhouette rigid with intent. And then, his voice, sharp and familiar, sliced through the silence. "Max, get over here, now!" The shepherd stiffened beside Jake, his body trembling, his breath shallow. A low, guttural growl vibrated from his throat. Jake had never heard that sound before, not from him. The name echoed in Jake's ears, a cold realization creeping in. The dog, his dog, had a past he had never spoken of. Instinctively, Jake tightened his grip on the shepherd's collar, steadying him. The dog's eyes, usually warm and trusting, were clouded with unease. The man, now just steps away, pulled a crumpled set of registration papers from his coat pocket, waving them in front of Jake. "This is my dog," the man stated, his voice flat but edged with impatience. "Had him since he was a pup. Just wandered off one day." Jake's jaw clenched. He looked down at the shepherd, whose body remained rigid, every muscle taut, every fiber of his being resisting the pull of the past. "He's not yours anymore," Jake said, his voice steady but firm. The shepherd trembled beneath Jake's touch, but he didn't move, didn't step forward, didn't even acknowledge the man's command. His dark, intelligent eyes flickered up to Jake, wide with fear, pleading. Jake felt something deep inside him twist. The dog wasn't just scared, he was terrified. Not of disobedience, but of return. Jake had seen that look before in people who had escaped something they never wanted to relive. Jake exhaled sharply. He wasn't going to let this happen. The man's face twisted in frustration, his patience wearing thin. "Look, I don't have time for this. He's mine. Just give him back and we won't have any problems." He took a step forward. The shepherd's growl deepened. Jake didn't move. "If he was yours," Jake countered, his voice like steel, "he wouldn't be looking at me like he's begging me to save him." The man's expression darkened. He lunged, fingers grasping for the shepherd's leash. But Jake was faster. He yanked the dog back, stepping in between them. The shepherd snapped, his teeth bared, his body bristling, a primal growl ripping from deep within his chest. His stance was firm, unyielding. He didn't cower, he didn't flinch. For the first time, he stood his ground, refusing to be dragged back into the life he had left behind. Jake had never seen him like this before. The shepherd wasn't just afraid, he was fighting. And Jake? He wasn't about to let him do it alone. Jake's pulse pounded in his ears, but his hands were steady as he pulled out his phone. "You lay one hand on him," he warned, "and I'm calling the cops." The man hesitated. His eyes flickered between Jake's unwavering stance and the shepherd's defiant glare. There was a moment of silence, thick, suffocating, like the final breath before a storm breaks. Then, with a scoff, the man stuffed the papers back into his pocket and stepped away. "Fine," he spat, his voice laced with bitterness. "Keep him. Just know, dogs remember where they come from, and some things you can't change." With that, he turned, climbed back into his truck, and with a screech of tires, disappeared into the night. The silence that followed was deafening. Jake exhaled, his body relaxing for the first time since the truck had arrived. The shepherd, still standing tall, let out a slow breath before lowering his head, his body finally releasing its tension. Jake looked down at him, a mixture of pride and relief flooding his chest. "Guess you made your choice, huh?" The shepherd's tail gave a slow, deliberate wag. The moment the adrenaline wore off, the shepherd's legs gave out, his body sinking into the grass. Jake was beside him in an instant, kneeling, running a hand through his fur. "You're okay," Jake murmured, his voice softer now. "You're safe." The shepherd let out a deep, exhausted sigh, pressing his head into Jake's lap. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the night was quiet again. The danger had passed. The fight was over. Jake smiled, resting his forehead against the shepherd's. "You're home," Jake woke up to the soft warmth of the shepherd curled up beside him. The past few days had been a whirlwind of survival, trust, and unspoken understanding between them. He ran a hand over the dog's thick fur, feeling a quiet sense of relief, but a nagging thought remained. Who was this dog before they found each other? Was someone out there searching for him? Determined to find answers, Jake reached for his phone and dialed the number of the local animal shelter. As the line rang, he glanced at the shepherd, who watched him with those intelligent, knowing eyes. No matter what he learned today, he knew one thing. This dog had changed his life. The shelter's response was immediate and unexpected. "You said he has a military-style collar?" the woman on the other end asked, her tone shifting from casual to serious. "Can you read the identification number?" Jake recited the faded engraving, and the silence that followed made his chest tighten. Then came the revelation. That dog was reported stolen months ago, from a military training base. He wasn't just a stray, he was taken. Jake's breath hitched. Stolen? Someone had taken this dog from his rightful place, but for what purpose? And how had he ended up lost and alone in the wilderness? As he processed the news, he glanced at the shepherd, who remained calm, unaware of the weight of the truth unfolding around him. The shelter provided more details. The shepherd had been in training for search and rescue operations, groomed for saving lives in disaster zones. His instincts, his intelligence, it all made sense now. Jake looked at the dog, a new depth of admiration filling his heart. This animal wasn't just a survivor, he had a mission. And yet, despite all he had been through, he had chosen to stay by Jake's side, protecting him, trusting him. What kind of bond did that create between them? And could he really let go now, after everything? "The authorities will likely want him back," the shelter representative said. "He's a valuable asset to the military. You should prepare for a call soon." Jake felt a knot tighten in his chest. Of course they would. This wasn't just any dog. He was trained, disciplined, and meant for a greater purpose. But could Jake truly hand him over? After the storm, the long nights, the quiet companionship, and the unshakable trust they had built. When the officials called, their request was clear. "We need him back at the base," an officer explained. "He's highly trained and invaluable to our team." Jake hesitated. "I understand, but he's been through so much. He's not just a working dog, he's part of something bigger now, with me." The silence on the other end stretched before the officer finally responded. "We'll assess the situation when we arrive." Jake exhaled, knowing this wasn't over yet. The moment of separation came too soon. The military team arrived, their presence a stark reminder of the shepherd's past. Jake knelt beside him, placing a steady hand on his neck. "They want you back, buddy," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "You were meant for something big." The shepherd gazed at him, his ears twitching as if understanding every word. Then, as the officers gave a command, the dog did something unexpected. He stayed. He didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't obey. His body remained firmly at Jake's side, his choice clear. One of the officers sighed. It seems his heart is already spoken for. After a long discussion, an agreement was reached. "We recognize that his loyalty has shifted," one official admitted. "Given the circumstances, we won't force him to return. If you're willing to take full responsibility, he's yours." Jake didn't hesitate. Absolutely. The paperwork was signed, and just like that, the shepherd was officially his. Relief washed over Jake as he ruffled the dog's fur, feeling the weight of the past days finally settle into something solid. A future. As they walked back to his cabin, Jake looked down at his companion. "You deserve a name that fits," he said thoughtfully. The dog wagged his tail, eyes locked onto Jake with unwavering trust. A name surfaced in his mind, one that embodied everything this shepherd had been through, his bravery, his loyalty, his spirit. "Valor," Jake murmured, "that's who you are." The shepherd let out a short, approving bark, as if accepting his new identity. And with that, their journey together truly began, a bond unbreakable, a story still unfolding. Jake never thought a stray dog would change his life. He had taken Valor in to save him from the cold, but in the end it was Valor who saved him. Through every challenge, every moment of doubt, and every silent night where loneliness once loomed, Valor stood by his side. Sometimes the ones we set out to save end up saving us in ways we never imagined. Abandoned and left to fend for himself, Valor had once known nothing but rejection. His old owners failed to see his worth, discarding him like an afterthought. But with Jake, everything changed. He was no longer just a stray, he was family. With each wag of his tail, each loyal gaze, he proved that love and loyalty thrive where they are nurtured. And for Jake, he finally understood what it meant to be truly needed. Trust wasn't something that happened overnight. At first, Valor had flinched at sudden movements, hesitated before accepting food, and kept his distance. But Jake was patient. He spoke in soft tones, extended a hand without force, and let Valor set the pace. Slowly, that fear melted away. Trust isn't instant. It's built over time, through patience, kindness, and small acts of devotion. Jake believed he was simply rescuing a lost dog. He thought he was the hero in this story. But as time passed, he realized the truth. Valor had been rescuing him all along. He had pulled Jake out of his grief, filled the empty spaces of his heart, and reminded him that love was still possible. Healing often comes from the most unexpected places, and in Valor, Jake found his own salvation. They had both been lost, one in sorrow, the other in abandonment. But together, they found what they had been searching for: purpose, companionship, a reason to keep going. In the quiet moments when Jake rested his hand on Valor's fur and felt the steady rise and fall of his breath, he knew. This wasn't just a dog. This was home.